Okay, I just wrapped up Victoria Cross II Deluxe from Worthington Games. This is the Battle of Isandlwana, not Works Drift. So this was the larger battle where about 1,500 British troops of the 24th Regiment of Foot were overrun and destroyed by some 20,000 or so Zulus. And pretty much the historical results happened here. I made it to turn 9, so I made it about halfway, a little more than halfway through the game. The goal of the British is simply to survive for 16 turns, and I gotta say that's a pretty tall order, at least if you're doing the historical setup, which I did, which, having actually just watched a documentary recently on Isandlwana, one of the reasons given for the British massacre was the fact that the troops were arrayed too far forward from their camp, and so weren't able to, the soldiers were spread out where there was a couple of yards between each soldier, and they weren't able to maximize the firepower that their Martini Henry rifles gave them. Which, you know, if they had been able to concentrate their fire, the odds actually would have, I don't know if they would have been in their favor, but they certainly would have had a decent chance of having enough firepower to stop even that many Zulus coming at them. So perhaps had they maintained a tighter fire cordon around their camp itself, which is where their ammunition was at, that was another problem, was that the British troops did not deploy their ammunition correctly, and there's a term for it, and I don't remember if they mention this in the rules or not, what the British were supposed to, what like the standard British practice at the time was, and how they were supposed to have their artillery deployed, or not artillery, ammunition deployed. Crap, they used this particular term for it. Now I don't remember what it was. So one of the issues is that if the British, if you roll ones when the British are doing their fire combat, they can potentially be out of ammunition, and their ammunition is traced back to zone 15 here. So depending on where they are, and the British units start deployed like all the way up here. So they're way far forward, and if they're doing a lot of fire combat, if you've got a lot of British strength points doing fire combat, you have the potential to roll multiple ones, and, you know, up here they're tracing, 2 zones back to zone 15, so, you know, you got to roll, if you roll a 2 or less on the die, then that unit's out of ammo. So you run into the possibility, the more firing that you're doing, and you're doing a lot because all the British units are on the map at this point, so you have all of them firing every turn, or nearly every turn. You have potential for units to be out of ammo, or they're basically, the next fire phase, they're not able to conduct fire combat. They basically have to take a turn off of fire combat. So it's tough if you're doing a lot of firing far away from the ammo, which is, I think, another reason that you want your troops close up, because you can maximize your fire. Now, the stacking limits in the game are, I think, 14 British strength points per zone. So, you know, you can't have like a monster stack in a space. You still have to spread them out a little bit. This game in particular ended, and it started with the historical British setup with them deployed far forward. I actually started pulling them back pretty early on in the game, but did make a stand. I think initially I had British troops here that stayed here for a really long time, working on firing at the Zulus as they started making their way into these other zones, which they can start entering some of these other surrounding zones on the turn that's indicated on these little shield icons. So I had a fairly large stack, I think a maximum 14-point stack of British troops here that were doing a lot of firing along the ridge here, while the other troops kind of tended to move back, and had the cavalry units also move back to start looking after these victory point spaces as the Zulus started to work their way around and enter onto the southern end of the board. So I started feeding a lot of Zulu troops in here through zone 30 because they had access to here and then getting over to here, or also troops here in zone 29, which can hide in the Donga here. The units British units that were not adjacent, I think, didn't have a line of sight here, if that's the way that worked. So from here, yeah, 29's not on there. So the way the Dongas work is that troops in this space are essentially hiding in the riverbed so that units that aren't right adjacent to them can't fire at them. So you can see adjacent here, you got 29. So, and then they had, again, good ability to get just one space away from the main 10-point victory space, because here you've got 5, here you've got 5, but 15 is the main camp, and that's worth the most victory points. And so you can see the Zulus did ultimately reach this space, and they ended up winning. I mean, they got the 10 victory points for this. They actually got it the turn before the game ended. Well, what they ended up winning on was, as you can see, if they reduced the British strength points to less than 10 on the board, and this counts only as 1 strength points. It's the artillery piece. It's worth 6 firepower, but it's only 1 strength point. These were the only 3 British units left. So presumably some of these cavalry guys were some of the ones that actually managed to get away and lived to tell the tale. I think historically something like 60 British troops survived out of the 1,500 that fought here, so the rest were massacred. So this ended pretty historically for the British. You can see all the British casualties over here. There was, you can see there's only 9 Zulu British victory points marked there, because the British did, on one of their turns, do something like 50-odd casualties to the Zulus through fire combat and melee combat. So I think there's a free setup, and I'm gonna look in let's check the rules here for the British for the free setup. Yeah, where you can just set them up wherever you want. Although it says the British cavalry in Durnford start setup using the standard game setup, the Zulu player sets up as normal. So you can reset up the British infantry, native infantry, pulling, and artillery in any zone except the 2 Zulu starting zones, which are zone Y and zone X there, and then they start to expand out as the turns progress. But you can potentially, I think the cavalry all starts deployed way up here too, and then some infantry here, maybe here. But I think historically, I would definitely concentrate the British back closer to the camp, try and get maximum stacks in as many zones as you can, because I think that maximum firepower will help. And the problem is this thing starts way advanced as well, and every time you move it, it basically prevents it from firing. So for that round, it's got to sit in place, before it can fire again. So you don't want to move this thing a lot, because it's worth 6 points. I mean, that's 3 companies of guys. So you want to try and keep this thing as stationary as possible, and in a zone where it's going to have lots of zones in range to fire at. So zone 16 is a good one. Or, I mean, you can put it back at camp too. The problem is you don't want British units blocking your lines of fire. So you always want to try and make sure that your units are in a zone that's not blocked from firing at the majority of the approaching Zulus by other British units. So you usually want your fire stacks unobstructed. So wherever you put this, you're going to want it in an unobstructed place, but in a place that it's not going to have to move a lot and continually fall back and lose turns, where it can contribute its firepower. So you would kind of build a set piece maybe around this, and defending out here would make sense for the British if you didn't have this possibility on later turns, of turn 5 here and turn 6 here of the Zulus coming in in zones where they can start to get around and get these other victory point spaces, because they only need 14 victory points to get what they need to win. I was just looking at the actual numbers of victory points, but getting these 3 is not going to be enough. They have to take the main camp, and then any combination of other spaces as well. So interesting. I hadn't really done that. Oh wait, my bad. I missed this 3 victory points down here. So they can potentially pick up all these other zones out around the camp, and that's going to do it. And presumably these are victory points because these are cutting off the British retreat, this is historically where the British troops ran to the river here to try and escape, those who survived. So this is where the retreat, the panic happened, was back this way. As you can see, this leads to Rorke's Drift, which is 10 miles away, which is where one of the detachments of the Zulu forces ended up going. So, historically, which is the battle you can play that's on the back of this board. But I wanted to start with Isandlwana because I don't think I ever actually played the Isandlwana battle on my older version of this that I have, the pre-deluxe version. So I decided to give this a try. And next up, I'll probably try Rorke's Drift, although in the interim, I think I'm going to take a crack at Soldiers of the Queen here from the old strategy and tactics game, which is another version of the Battle of Isandlwana, and then try the newer strategy and tactics Battle of Isandlwana. So try 3 different takes on Isandlwana and see which one does it best. I have to say, I do love this Victoria Cross system. It's just very simple. Love the area control. Really like that they've put all of the other visible zones that each zone has a line of fire to just on the map, so you don't have to worry about it. If only all war games made it this simple. But your average hex and counter game can't list every single hex that a particular hex that have a line of sight to on the map, obviously. So, but it is nice for just a simple light system like this with the to offer the line of sight zone numbers right there on the map. Very handy. And I do like the map for this. It's changed a little bit for the deluxe version. This stuff looks different here, and then the ridge line, they've done this sort of shading. You can see this here. This is basically all that used to be on the original map, was just the brown drawing on there. It didn't have this weird sort of painted on ridge. But I guess they put it here because it made it clearer where the ridge is, or looks nicer or something. I don't know. The map still has this sort of hand-drawn look to it, which I like. But they've changed the graphics a little bit from what the original Victoria Cross II release had. So anyway, just wanted to do a recap of my playthrough of Isandlwana. Just a great, fun, quick playing, light game, gorgeous components with the new deluxe edition, and glad I picked this up to give it a try, and I look forward to doing Rorke's Drift when I get to that eventually.